It has happened to you. You are somewhere you have never been before, a new city, a restaurant you are visiting for the first time, a conversation that has just begun, and without warning, a feeling arrives that is almost impossible to describe accurately. The feeling that you have been here before, that this exact moment, these specific words, this particular arrangement of light and sound and sensation has already happened. That you are not experiencing something new, but remembering something that is somehow occurring simultaneously. A sense of recognition so strong and so wrong that it produces a specific kind of unease. Not fear exactly, something stranger than fear. The uncanny certainty of the impossible. And then it fades, usually within seconds, leaving you with nothing except the memory of having had the feeling and the knowledge that it made no sense. This is déjà vu, the French phrase for already seen, and it is one of the most studied and least understood phenomena in all of neuroscience. Because the feeling is so universal, approximately 60 to 80% of people report experiencing it at least once, and yet the mechanism that produces it has resisted clean explanation for over a century of scientific investigation. What makes déjà vu genuinely strange as a scientific problem is not just that it is hard to explain. It is that it is almost impossible to study. The experience arrives without warning, lasts for seconds, and leaves no trace in behavior or brain imaging that could be captured in a laboratory. You cannot make it happen on demand. You cannot tell someone to have it and measure what occurs. For most of the history of research into déjà vu, the only data available was retrospective self-report, people describing what had happened to them after the fact, in language that rarely captured the specific quality of the experience itself. The progress that has been made has come from two sources: patients with temporal lobe epilepsy who experience déjà vu as part of their seizure activity and who can therefore be monitored neurologically while the experience is occurring, and from experimental work using carefully designed stimuli that reliably induce a milder, laboratory-appropriate version of the feeling in healthy subjects. The temporal lobe epilepsy research has been the most revealing. Patients with seizures originating in the temporal lobe, particularly in the hippocampus and the parahippocampal gyrus, frequently report déjà vu as a component of their aura, the warning signal that precedes a full seizure. When electrodes are placed on these regions to monitor seizure activity, researchers can observe exactly what is happening in the brain during the déjà vu episode. What they consistently find is aberrant electrical activity in the regions of the brain responsible for memory processing and familiarity detection, specifically the circuits that evaluate incoming information and generate the signal that tells you whether you have encountered something before. This points toward the most widely accepted current explanation for déjà vu, the dual processing theory. The idea that the brain uses two parallel streams to process incoming experience. One stream handles the perception of the current moment, what is happening right now in real time. A second stream handles the comparison of current perception against stored memory, evaluating whether what is being perceived has been encountered before, and generating the familiarity signal accordingly. In normal processing, these two streams are synchronized. You perceive something and simultaneously receive the correct familiarity assessment, familiar or novel as appropriate. Déjà vu in the dual processing account occurs when these two streams become briefly desynchronized. The perception of the current moment arrives correctly, but the familiarity assessment fires incorrectly, generating a strong familiarity signal for something that has no corresponding memory. The result is the paradoxical experience of the present moment feeling like a memory. Not because it is one, because the system that generates familiarity feelings has briefly misfired. The epilepsy data supports this. The regions that misfire during seizure-related déjà vu are exactly the regions that generate familiarity signals, the perirhinal cortex and the parahippocampal gyrus, which are responsible for generating the felt sense of recognition before the specific memory itself is retrieved. Under normal conditions, these regions respond to stimuli that genuinely have been encountered before. In temporal lobe epilepsy, and it appears in the milder version that healthy people experience, they can fire in the absence of any genuine prior encounter. The experimental work has approached the problem differently. Researcher Chris Moulin and his colleagues have used a technique called the DRM paradigm. presenting people with lists of words that are all semantically related to one central word that never actually appears on the list, to induce a laboratory version of the false familiarity that underlies déjà vu. The central word feels familiar even though it was never presented because the surrounding words have primed its neural representation. This is a much milder and more controlled version of the feeling, but it recruits the same cognitive machinery, and studying it has helped researchers understand which specific components of the memory system are involved. The pattern that emerges from both lines of research suggests that déjà vu is not a memory phenomenon in the traditional sense. It is a metacognitive phenomenon, a conflict between what the brain knows and what the brain feels. The knowing system is operating correctly. It correctly identifies the current situation as new. The feeling system is misfiring. It generates the felt sense of familiarity regardless. The result is the specific quality of déjà vu that makes it so difficult to describe, the simultaneous certainty of both recognition and impossibility. You feel you have been here before, and you know you have not. Both at once, neither resolving the other. This metacognitive conflict is also why déjà vu is associated with healthy brain function in most people. The fact that you notice the conflict, that you experience the wrongness of the familiarity feeling, that you register the impossibility rather than simply accepting the false recognition as real, indicates that the systems responsible for monitoring and evaluating your own cognitive states are working correctly. Déjà vu feels strange precisely because you are detecting the error. A brain that was not monitoring itself correctly would simply accept the false familiarity as a genuine memory and experience it as recollection rather than as the uncanny feeling of impossible recognition. The people most likely to experience déjà vu frequently are young adults between the ages of 15 and 25, after which frequency typically declines. People who travel frequently report higher rates of déjà vu, possibly because exposure to more varied environments creates more opportunities for partial perceptual matches to stored memory. People who are tired or stressed report higher rates, possibly because the synchronization between the processing streams becomes less precise under cognitive load. And people who watch films and television frequently have been found to report slightly higher rates, possibly because the brain's exposure to a wider range of depicted environments creates a larger library of weakly encoded visual experiences that can produce false familiarity matches. There is a pathological version of déjà vu that sits at the opposite end of the spectrum from the brief and self-correcting experience most people have. Chronic déjà vu, in which the feeling is persistent, overwhelming, and indistinguishable from genuine memory, has been documented in a small number of patients. These patients experience everything as familiar. They stop watching the news because it all feels like something they have already seen. They stop reading because every book feels like one they have already read. They cannot form new experiences in the normal sense because every new experience is immediately colored by the false sense of prior encounter. Unlike epileptic déjà vu, chronic déjà vu of this type does not appear to be seizure-related. Its cause is not yet fully understood. The experience that most people have, the brief, disorienting, seconds-long feeling of impossible recognition, represents the healthy version of a system briefly misfiring and being caught by the monitoring systems that govern it. It's the brain making an error and knowing it is making an error, the metacognition working correctly around a signal that is not. What the science has not yet fully answered is why the error produces such a specific and distinctive phenomenology. Why does a familiarity signal misfire feel like that? Why does it have that particular quality of uncanny recognition, that specific sensation of the present moment overlapping with an imagined past? Why is it so reliably strange, so reliably brief, so reliably impossible to hold on to? The feeling arrives, it lasts a few seconds, it leaves no trace except the memory of having had it and the knowledge that something in the brain briefly said you had been somewhere you had never been. And then the world becomes new again, as it always was, as it always is. The error corrected, the streams resynchronized, the present moment returned to its proper status as something that has never happened before and will never happen again. Until the next time.